Hi, so I'm Elizabeth Morgan and I'm Head of Customer Onboarding and Customer Services for Bromcom. So my department is responsible for delivering the system to schools, training schools in the system and supporting them once they're live. I recently joined Bromcom from a local authority where I spent almost 3 years, so I think I have some understanding of what you do, and that's very much shaped my presentation today. So the purpose of this presentation, which hopefully won't take too long, given we're running behind, is to kind of outline a bit more about how the onboarding process actually works. Now, this is really important because moving systems and the prospect of moving systems can actually be a really big barrier to change. People are very apprehensive about it and they can't imagine how what their process looks like. So hopefully after this presentation, you'll get a bit of a better understanding about how it works and how Bromcom have done it before. So this slide just sets out a bit of context. The first bullet highlights our experience, which other colleagues have already mentioned in their presentation, but Bromcom has been delivering software into schools for quite literally decades, ranging from kind of small projects with individual schools through to large programs with multi-academy trusts. So I think because of our customer base having a high proportion of MATs, we do have that kind of large-scale program management implementation experience. The second bullet highlights the capabilities that we have in-house to help customers manage that onboarding process. So I mentioned data migration. There's not really a way to make this sound kind of sexy or exciting, but Bromcom has a real strength in data migration, which colleagues have already mentioned. As anybody who's ever worked on any kind of systems implementation project will know, data migration is generally the most high-risk and complex part of it. But we have significantly invested in that and been able to automate data migration from legacy systems, a range of different systems, which has removed the majority of the technical complexity in moving away from systems and onto Bromcom. Second thing I'd mention, which again has already been mentioned, is our training and consultation division, where some of our consultants have been working in the education sector for decades and really understand how to apply technology in schools in a really impressive way, and we get excellent feedback on that. And the third capability I'd highlight is our support desk, which again I know colleagues have mentioned. I think we have a high-performing support desk anyway for direct support to schools, but what we have is experience working with support centres, so very relevant to the audience here today. So we have 7 support centres already, 5 of which are for maintained schools, and they support over 130 schools. So Bromcom has kind of led them on that journey from supporting SIMS or other legacy systems through to being able to provide first and second line support for Bromcom in a matter of months. And the final bullet is really important. Generally, in choosing a cloud-based system, you already have a fairly simple journey to move systems. So people are very worried about the kind of technical complexity of moving, but ultimately it's a kind of vanilla system which requires very minimal customization. And so the main focus in onboarding to Bromcom is around user adoption, change management, making sure that that people are trained and comfortable with the system. So kind of gone are the days when you'd be worrying about server configurations. All of that has been completely removed from the process. So hopefully that gives you a bit of context of our experience. So this slide outlines our offer to local authorities, which again we've already touched on. And this, again, is relevant to those of you who already have a support centre, which you may be looking to convert to support other systems in future. So starting from the left, all of our customers benefit from our project and change management advice and tools that we have. So I've already mentioned data migration and the self-service delivery portal. What that is it's a tool that we give to customers who want to migrate from other systems, and it, as I said, automates data migration. So, it literally takes 4 hours to move 5-10 years worth of data from a legacy MIS onto Bromcom. Again, removing a high degree of the technical complexity and risk that you would ordinarily find with a project like this. Any support partner who wants to be involved in the implementation, has that appetite, has that capacity, we would be training you on that tool. That's exactly the same tool as we use in-house. So it's a really great offer that we have to any partners out there. The final bullet also highlights that obviously we've been in this game a long time, so we have quite a good network of project managers out there. So any local authority who is thinking about how they would upskill a project to move to Bromcom, we have a good network of people that we can put you in touch with. So that's that. Moving on to the middle column, this is something that we've already mentioned. This is our accreditation programme for those support centres. So generally, that starts with a kind of what we call a maturity assessment, but it generally looks at who are the staff you have in-house and what are the roles they're currently doing. And then we work with you to come up with a training plan that's tailored towards you. For support centres who are currently supporting a school MIS, such as SIMS, generally, as I said here, within 2 to 3 months, you can be conversant in the Bromcom product and ready to provide first and second line support. As I say, it mentions there the bootcamp training programme. At the moment, that suggests around 30 hours training, which can be done remotely. But again, it would be tailored according to the staff that you have in-house and the capabilities you have there. At the end of that training process, there's an accreditation process, which consists of tests based on both knowledge and skills of the Bromcom system. And, you know, once those tests have been completed and a relevant score has been achieved, that's when we say, right, you're signed off as a support partner and you're ready to support Bromcom. Obviously, we're there throughout that process, and even at the end of that process, we're still providing the third line support, so you have that direct line of access to us. So hopefully that outlines a bit of detail on that accreditation programme. And the final column on the right just talks about the development partner opportunities that a local authority would get in choosing to come with Bromcom. So obviously there may be specific requirements that you have in a local authority context, or you know, specific features or enhancements. And, you know, obviously through working with us, you do get advanced access to our product roadmap and the opportunity to input into that. Right, so now I've explained a bit of context. This is actually the methodology for deploying Bromcom to a cluster of schools. So this is not an individual school project. This is how we approach large-scale implementations, as we've done with multi-academy trusts and maintained schools in the past. So as you can see, it's staged and therefore it's controlled and you learn as you go. So you start with a joint planning session where we would work with your project team and your support centre and define, you know, what we're going to deliver to whom and by when. And crucially, at that point, we would have the conversation around who's going to be providing support at the end. We then move through a series of stages, which I'm going to outline a bit more on in the next few slides. We've got the pilot, the pathfinder, the main deployment and transition, and I'll give a bit more detail on the next few slides. The numbers at the top illustrate months, and this gives you an indicative timeline. So for a local authority of, say, 80 schools, based on the projects that we've done so far, you could be deploying to around 80 schools in around 6 months, depending on your capacity and capability to do that. Again, benefiting from those tools we've talked about, so that self-service delivery portal and the training and support that we will give you. Right, so going into a bit more detail about each of the phases. So this is what we call the discovery and mobilization phase. So assuming that you've purchased the Bromcom system and we're ready to kick off a deployment to a cluster of schools. At this stage, we'd be looking at, as I say, having that conversation around how do you want support to work and in what time frame do you want to convert the support you currently provide to Bromcom. At that point, we'd agree the programme plan. So that's that joint session where you benefit from all of our experience. You know, we've got standard templates and tools that we would give you to help shape that programme timeline. And we would define the programme team at that point as well. So those staff that you've currently got that you want to be involved in the implementation and support, at that point we would get them sort of kind of boot camp to us. If they were looking to support the system in, weeks or months, they would start shadowing the Bromcom team. Right, so we've defined the programme, we've got a kind of plan of action. That's when we're ready to move on to actually piloting it. So generally, with a large-scale rollout, we would choose a pilot site. So they don't go live at this point. We just do a test migration. So for those authority support centres who wanted to deliver that, we would help you do a test migration using the self-service delivery portal on just one site. So as mentioned, at the same time, the school is still running its current system. This is just to prototype the approach. Once we're comfortable with that and the team are comfortable with how you do an onboarding for a school alone, we would be ready to move to the Pathfinder stage. So at this point, you would typically choose 10% of schools, a representative sample, so you'd probably pick a few primaries, a few secondaries, and again, give them a test system. So they'd have a test system for a few weeks, and that would allow you to refine your sort of delivery and crucially your training plan. So you'd look at the data migration, but hopefully you're pretty comfortable with that by then. You'd really be looking at how their training's going and how they're finding using the system, and feed all of that into your main kind of deployment plan. And yeah, refine it and kind of reduce some of the risk around that. After a few weeks doing that, you're ready to move on to deploying to more schools. So you've already learned quite a bit in the pilot and Pathfinder phase. And so based on our experience so far with Multi-Academy Trust, you can do quite a high burn rate at this point. So I've put 10 to 40 a week. We've got Jim from Oasis here. I think the largest we did with Oasis was probably 10 in 1 week.
Yeah, I think it maybe a bit less, but it was around that number.
Yeah.
But I mean, our model follows very closely what you just showed actually on the last slide.
Yeah.
I think we had 10 schools in the Pathfinder pilot phase, and then 41 in the main rollout, and the 41 went across 4 months, staggered with a decent break at half term.
Yeah, we did 2 weeks, 3 weeks,
Yeah.
half term, a week either side of half term.
Yeah. And so we used half term to kind of take stock of the first half of the main rollout and see where we are. But it all went very successfully, so we just kind of rolled on as planned, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, I think the Harris presentation, they were sort of double the burn rate you were. So, I mean, the second bullet just highlights that throughout this process, Bromcom is still there supporting. So, again, in this model, we haven't handed over support yet. It's likely that, the support centre may be supporting the Pathfinder schools or an even smaller cluster of schools just to see how that goes. But Bromcom is still very much there, providing that first and second line support for the schools. And then the final point just is just to highlight the kind of monitoring that we do throughout, just to make sure, obviously, that things are going as planned. So the final phase is transition. So this might be when all of the schools are live, and we're continuing to work with the support centre, as I say, on that accreditation piece. So, you may have been shadowing us for sort of 1 to 2 days a week, and you'll have been going through some quite intense training. We would then agree over a series of months when the accreditation criteria has been met, and therefore sign you off as kind of as accredited support partners for the Bromcom product. The final bullet talks about the CRM process. So ahead of that accreditation being awarded, as it were, we would be kind of going through a CRM call process, which is where we call schools and just make sure that they're happy with how everything has gone. And that is the kind of final sign-off for handing over that support. And that is a very, very quick summary of the accreditation process and how we do the customer onboarding in partnership with support centres.